So just now Netflix finally released the second volume of season 3 of The Witcher, and honestly it is not good at all. And if you think about it deeper, it is actually very stupid. When the first volume dropped, I wasn't too keen on titling it bad, right off the bat like so many others were. After all, what we saw was an incomplete season. I was simply willing to give it a shot at paying off what was going on in season 3. Well, it kind of did that, but not really. Not in a satisfying way at least. So let's run through the problems that permeate this season. And the first problem that I noticed is that this show just comes across as insecure. And we already saw this problem back in Blood Origin. Because of course, if they have to point out that the story they are telling is totally awesome and epic, it makes it awesome and epic, right? So the major way this shows up is in how the characters interact with each other. You see, The Witcher never really riddled itself with good character development and depth. This show is above such stupid shit. So instead of character connections establishing relationships, we have characters just pointing out how they feel about other characters. For example, we have Yennefer just screaming this at Tissaia as if she was participating in the trenches of a culture war and replying to her favorite drag queen on Twitter.
Remember your strength. You are Tissaia de Vries, you are our mother.
I mean, do you really have to point this out? It's not like we didn't get this sentiment before from the two of them. Tissaia showed she cared, in her own weird way.
How much for this beast?
6.
4.
Sold.
But the show during the season suddenly made Tissaia and Yen really soppy. It's like any nuance to their relationship was sucked right out. And now they are just deep in love with one another? Really? I would have preferred if the show actually stuck to its guns and made Tissaia remain as cold as she was in season 1. I always liked that the Witcher books had this sort of an unspoken bond between characters. Like Yen and Geralt being parents to Ciri. They didn't exactly shove it in your face by making the characters scream this stuff out. At least to my memory. But there was enough subtlety and enough dynamics established that it allowed for us to connect the dots ourselves. And season 1 had this dynamic between Yen and Tissaia too. This sort of a mismatched mother and daughter relationship that was kept subtle. But I guess the show just became too insecure and thought that right before Tissaia was written off, the audience wasn't going to get what sort of relationship these two characters had. Also, Jaskier feels the need to say this out loud.
Come with me then.
No. No, I have to find my family.
Again, just why? Why? So I guess Jaskier is now the fun uncle. And do not even get me started on the whole ship between Jaskier and Radovid. Because we barely get a few interactions between them and suddenly they are now a couple, honestly, it just kind of goes to show how lacking the writing overall is. That the writers even have to resort to spelling things out for you. Imagine having so little faith in your audience and your own show that you just straight up tell them these things. Do they assume that we are completely dumb? Okay, so speaking of writing, the season's problem number 2, it's just that it's very shallow, and not in a cutesy way Lady Gaga sang about. Listen, you have to applaud the writer's room on this one. The show really consistently brings stupidity to the table, because whenever the show faces any sort of problem or an issue, whenever characters have to overcome something, the show just crafts the most generic and generalized way of dealing with it. The biggest and dumbest example is probably the whole lead up to the conclave. And here I mean straight up a lack of any nuance to it whatsoever. The scene that weirdly bothers me is when the sorceresses want to invite people to the banquet, essentially the kings and queens of the continent. The show proceeds to just show all of the sorceresses sit around a table and do DIY arts and crafts and handmade invitations.
Invitations are going out across the continent.
Am I the only one that finds this scene absolutely ridiculous? So you mean to tell me that these powerful sorceresses who boss around novices to bring them wine would just straight up have nothing better to do than doing origami? I have no idea if my hatred for this scene is even rational, so bear with me. How is it shallow, you might ask? Well, if the writers had any clue, they would have added at least some seriousness and intrigue into there. I don't know, at least showed these invitations be delivered? I mean, they do show one invitation being delivered. But like, maybe show us reactions of the kings and queens of the continent? What if someone cancels? At least some substance there would have been nice, instead of just folding origami. And there is also just a lot of bloat that honestly leads to nowhere. For example, Istrid keeps whining about the book and the monoliths, right? And oh look, it's the same book from Blood Origin, as if it was supposed to be some fan service. Fuck. But again, what about it? Why should we even care about this random dude going around and preaching about the stupid monoliths? I mean, if you want to add bloat, at least add some meaning to it. And do not even get me started on the whole elves thing. Listen, right from the get-go, I really disliked their inclusion. It's not that the concept of elves is bad. It's just that The Witcher included them just because? Even back in season 2, I used to just skip ahead their scenes, because they were all so boring and kind of pointless. But at least in season 2 they manufactured a way to keep them at least somewhat relevant. But honestly, what on earth are they doing here? They keep showing them to us, but again, who cares, honestly? Yet the moment that came across too shallow to me, and which takes the entire cake for being the most offensive, is the way they handle Tisea and her death. So she takes her own life, right? And the end finds her. But I am a bit mad because they kind of skimmed the death, which is kind of ridiculous considering just moments ago Yennefer was screaming that Tisea was completely mothering and just how slay she was. Even Eskel in season 2 had more to his death. Even a bunch of nameless girls who got killed by Vilgefortz got more time devoted to them than a character who was with us right from season 1. And one of the more compelling characters, might I add. And you might say that this was used to symbolize the effects of war and real life, and that sometimes you just gotta move on and yada yada yada. But that just doesn't make sense here. It really does not. But the biggest problem with this season, and honestly the show in general, is that it is painfully simplified to the point of absurdity. And this honestly shows up in everything, from writing to even production. I can pull out the most random example, like when Fringilla and Francesca want to meet up with Emir, and they just get to him, no complications or anything. Like, they do the job to display this large-ass empire and castle, but just like that they get to him, not to mention the fact that the last time Emir saw her, she was a prisoner of his, and he even makes a cheeky comment.
Fringilla, it appears you have returned from the grave just in time.
And she just strolls into there as if nothing ever happened. Again, such a random example, but from the show that pretends to be an epic fantasy, where is all the decorum? Where on earth is all the nuance? Did it take a vacation? Same with every scene in Redania. Philippa brags about having a strategy.
I knew I could trust you with my life. But not my strategy.
What?
I've made plans to protect us both.
What do you mean?
And her strategy is shown as being some random NPC, killing off the king, just like that. Where are the fucking guards? Where are the complications? Where are the obstacles? This person literally just committed regicide like it was a stroll in the park. Same goes for the mages. They just allow themselves to be tied up by Redanians? You mean these characters that have powerful magic, and are later shown mowing Redanians down like it was nothing? Or when the sorceresses find the weird monster made by Vilgi, and they make a point of the magic being ultra bad.
What kind of magic can do this?
None we've ever practiced.
None like any we've ever seen.
But then they proceed to immediately remove the spell that they never practiced. Rienzi, a villain for season 2 and 3, has his head chopped off without any complications whatsoever. And the entirety of the show is just like that. Characters getting to places, characters doing things that would be at least somewhat complicated. But the show cuts away all of that just because. And upon further reflection, all of this makes The Witcher season 3 really stupid. Sure, it is written better than season 2, but the bar was below the floor at that point. Anything is an improvement. But what I really hate is that season 3 was supposed to display the coup of Thaned, aka the event that the previous 2 seasons were basically leading up to. But because the writing is so shallow and meaningless, you actually do not even care what goes down. Honestly, I just sat there in complete silence and prayed for it to end. I mean, sure, the the whole deal with Ciri and Yen and Geralt was somewhat engaging, and the fight between Vilgefortz and Geralt was actually great. But everything else, which actually makes up an obscene amount of the show, no, I did not care about it at all. Again, a complete nothing burger, 0 calories. Thank you for giving us nothing. I just cannot comprehend how stupid everything is. It could have been at least somewhat good if they tried to make it make sense and add some subtlety and a bit of nuance to the writing, but they just did not even bother to do that at all. I just hope that Henry Cavill moves on to do some better, greater things. So thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.